What's up, Crucible Nation? Thank you so much for the raid, Andrew Wilson, as always helping me out, even when I don't deserve it, when I'm just sitting around doing nothing on a Tuesday. I was having fun, was doing a little cleaning, watching Andrew and Zen make fun of lefties, as should be the normal order of things. It never gets old. That's what we have that they don't. See, here's the thing. We could have minor disagreements on issues and, spats on specifics and policies that we want to see. But the things that we have as part of a Crucible Nation in the invasion that the left will never have are two things. One, we are not mind-numbing idiots. We actually are free thinkers that can think on our own and actually put two thoughts together and not just put talking points that we hear, randomly juxtapose them beside each other in a way that doesn't make sense, like that last girl that Andrew and Zen were doing quite the great job of eviscerating. And the other thing is that we actually have fun. There were actual people that understand, because we believe in things like a strong family, because we believe in things like God, that it allows us to go out and understand, no matter how black-pilled you things aren't black-pilled. Things are great. That's what sets us apart from them. That's why we can have fun. That's why we're willing to debate anyone at any time. Any one of us. Tonight I'm doing a debate that's going to be on the Crucible. I think it's moderated by Zen. I could be wrong. But whoever it is, Crucible moderation is always the best, even when I'm moderating. And it's going to be on the Electoral College. And I'll be straight up with you. You know how much research I've done, on what the Founding Fathers said of the Electoral College? Not a lot in the past 4 or 5 years. But I will crush in that debate. Why? Because I have the good fortune of being on the right side of that debate. And also, I'm not a total idiot that's just going to be spewing talking points that I learned in my intro to government course in the liberal college that I went to. So it should be a lot of fun. But no, always happy to have a Crucible audience here. I thought we would start talking about sort of the last person that Andrew was talking to there, Andrew and Zen. There were two sort of topics. There was the topic of sort of policing, hierarchies and things like that Andrew was getting into. And then there was the topic of abortion that Zen was getting into. And in both cases, that's when I tuned in. I saw Andrew talking to her first, so I didn't see who else he was talking to. I guess before I start, I'll say this. I'm going to put a link up to all of my channels. And all I'm asking right now, you can save your money. You don't have to donate to me. I'm a greedy capitalist. I'll happily take your money. But don't worry about sending money. If you really want to help me out today, what you could do is you could follow me particularly on TikTok. Because until I get 1,000 TikTok viewers, and I'm unable to join people's live streams on TikTok. So eventually I'll get there and I'll be able to join the invasion with Zen, with Andrew, and all the other great people, Jim Bob. And I know Andrew's going to help me get there, which I'm incredibly appreciative for. But yeah, it's a fantastic idea. I don't know how much Andrew's talked about why it's important to raid this space. We should not cede ground on any platform. Why am I on a platform right now like YouTube or a platform like Twitch? I remember there's an excellent person that I think the Crucible audience would really like. She goes by the name of the Crusader Gal. Her name's Sarah Kane. You can check out our YouTube channel, the Crusader Gal. She's fantastic. She's someone who specializes in talking about religion and about how satanic basically our current systems of government are. And she's really great, really smart. I think you guys would like her. I remember doing a live stream with her once, and I was streaming on Twitch and she was streaming on YouTube, and we had to spend an hour before the show talking about the topics we couldn't talk about on each platform. So we couldn't talk about transgender issues because I was on Twitch. We couldn't talk about COVID issues because she was on YouTube. It is insane how much control and censorship the establishment and these sort of goons that are particularly on the left need to employ to make sure that they can't be on equal footing with people like the Crucible, with people like me, and with other people. Because they can't win the argument based on its merits. So they have to control all of these institutions. They have to keep voices off of academia. They have to make sure they're indoctrinating everyone through the entertainment industry. They have to make sure that their legacy media and mainstream media, which I use the term media loosely, and social media are working in collusion with our government, particularly the establishment government, to censor thoughts that they think are counterintuitive. They have to be putting out there in the ether all of the demonization of Christianity and family values and things like that, and the promoting of promiscuous culture. They have to have a full court press all the time because they can't win when it's a battle of ideas and we're in the same arena as them. That's constantly what happens. I heard Andrew say he was invited on Kick or Keep. Go watch Kick or Keep episode 9. I was on there. It was literally the only person that was remotely on my side was libertarian Fabian Liberty. They booted him off round 1. So it was me versus 7 every round until the end, right? But that's how they have to have it. They have to stack the deck like that. And even still they lose, So, yeah, I appreciate any TikTok follows Did I say Tic Tac? Rob's Tic Tac is what it sounded like. Maybe. But yeah, I don't want no bots. I want all real people. And let me kiss the Crucible's ass one quick time here before we move on and talk about this girl that they were debating. One of the things I love about the Crucible is that they didn't take the easy way out. They're not botted up like you see so many accounts, even right-wing accounts on certain platforms, that you'll see, oh, there's 600 people watching their channel, yet no one's commenting. I wonder why. So I appreciate the hard work that Andrew and Rachel and Zen and all the other great people at the Crucible have put in to actually build up organically an audience. And the reason their audience is growing is twofold. Because the message, well, three, I guess. One, because they're fun. Second, because the message that they're showing is something that people are thirsty for. And third, because even people that disagree understand that it's the most fair-minded platform to go. You could be a rabid lefty that absolutely hates Andrew or Rachel or me or Zen. And I shouldn't even put myself in there. I'm more of a periphery character of the Crucible. But Zen and Rachel and Andrew and Jim Up, you could hate them, yet you know that if they're moderating a debate or something for you, you're going to get the fairest moderation possible. So I think that's why the audience is growing so organically for the Crucible, and I'm happy for it. So this girl that they were debating, let's start with Andrew talking to her. She says she's against hierarchy. This is the part I thought was hilarious. Obviously, Andrew's correctly grilling her on sort of, there will always be a law enforcement hierarchy. It's inevitable. In fact, not only is it inevitable, it's probably one of the best things in our society. We don't want pure vigilantism, right? We don't want it where it's just purely, oh, okay, anyone who wants retribution can take it on themselves. Sometimes things like that are necessary if your family's personally being attacked or something like that. But we want as a country to set up a nation of laws that theoretically has a just cast of people tasked with enforcing those laws. To say that it all be community-based, it's so laughable. And kudos to Andrew for pointing out and trying to grant positions of hers, and still, that's something that you should do. You should try to grant as much of your opponent's argument and still be able to say, even if we concede these portions of it, here's why you're still wrong. On the face value, though, it's an absurd premise because it's literally not possible. It's literally not possible. And Andrew gets to the heart of that. Someone comes out of their car wielding a knife. What do? Call everyone in your HOA and be like, hey, we need to take a vote on how to deal with this guy wielding a knife at me right now. It's nonsensical. It doesn't make sense on face value. But one of the things I thought was hilarious that she said was she wants to get rid of hierarchies. And the three that she isolated, if I remember this, was race hierarchies, gender hierarchies, and class hierarchies. Let's skip race and gender for a minute, which are laughable on their own right, and let's go to class hierarchies. What does that look like? So if you work 100 hours a week and bust your hump and you save up the assets that you've worked to obtain, and you're trying to have children and give your children something from when you pass that they could hopefully build on and give to their children, which is kind of one of the things that have made this country great. She says, no, you shouldn't be able to do that. We shouldn't have class hierarchies. Just because you work harder and obtain more wealth, that doesn't mean that you should be in a position that's any different than the person who decides, I want to sit around and do drugs all day, watch pornography, and not do anything productive for society whatsoever. How do we end class hierarchies? See, here's the truth. Hierarchies, there is room for criticism, because if you don't criticize hierarchies, oftentimes what can happen is it's not the people that are the most capable or the best for society that rises to the top of the hierarchy, but it's people that get there through corruption and other such things. So it's important to challenge hierarchies, specific hierarchies, that's true. But hierarchies are also inevitable, and they're good. Hierarchies are good. Like, even if you go back to the foundational basis of societies, right? There were certain things that we had that was necessary for a village to function, like food. Well, some people are better hunters. Some people are better farmers. That puts them in a higher class. That's good. The way that balances out is there are so many hierarchies in our society that the idea is hopefully you'll be okay or good at one of those hierarchies. That's the idea. And we have a very complex society, so that could be the case. But she's just spouting nonsense about the end of hierarchies and things like that. She talked about mental illness. Oh, mental illness, she admits that she was being hyperbolic, but she'd somehow be able to cure it. What's the disease you're talking about? I give you the illness. How about a diagnosis of intermittent explosive disorder? So I happen to work in the home healthcare field with people with developmental disabilities, autism, and things like that. One of the more common diagnoses you'll see is something called intermittent explosive disorder. It's basically a catch-all for random acts of violence and rage. Now, do I think that we shouldn't have healthcare to try to help those people out? Absolutely not. In fact, I work in the field providing that. But even me, who has a huge soft spot, particularly with the people I work with, I understand the need for law enforcement if I'm in a situation where even if it's someone I care about, they lash out at a member of the public. I've seen it happen. I've seen members of the public be crushed by people with mental health. What are we supposed to do? Not have law enforcement? We're supposed to talk them down? We send in the psychiatric department? These people are laughable. I've listened to them. They'll say things like this. Well, the problem is instead of sending the police, what we need to do is send caseworkers. Let's send caseworkers, healthcare caseworkers. And I'm sure if Andrew would have got further down the line, it would have been like, well, what types of calls would you not send police on? One of the ones that they'll say frequently, which is hilarious because it shows they know nothing of what they're talking about, is the idea that we should send caseworkers to domestic disputes. Now, anyone who knows anyone in law enforcement or anything about law enforcement knows one of the most dangerous calls for law enforcement to get called on are domestic disputes. Because tensions are raised, there's a tendency for violence not only among domestic partners, but also when the police get there for violence to be, from people you wouldn't expect for violence to be directed at police. What are we going to do? Send some lady with her clipboard and pencil to a domestic dispute? Then what happens when she gets knocked out or hit or even worse? Then what? Then what are we doing? And they'll say, well, we'll train those people. We'll train them. With what? How's that pencil-pushing person going to stand up to a violent domestic case? Well, we'll arm them. Well, wasn't that the whole argument, that you were against violence? So instead of trying to take the police force we already have and make sure they're operating in better ways, which is perfectly fine. No one, Andrew, myself, or anyone else would argue against the fact that there's always room for improvement. I welcome people questioning our current institutions and systems. I do it all the time and saying, how can we make them better? But the idea that you think we could live in some utopia, that the threat of violence by the state or by people in some sort of hierarchy will no longer be necessary is laughable. All of human history proves that's not the case. Show me one society where it's ever worked. Show me one. And this is the same mentality that leads to gays for Palestine. They just look at this world in this, these talking points that they've heard from the left-wing media and education that they consume like garbage, and they spew it out without even remotely thinking through it. And the problem is real-world consequences actually then punch you in the face. They don't care. They don't care about your high-minded alleged moral principles. By the way, those same moral principles that they're willing to throw out at the mere sight of anything that they disagree with. So she's against violence and things like that. I wonder what she would think about the January 6 people. Think she's been protesting about the unfair incarceration of the nonviolent members of that group? Probably not, huh? Can I talk to some non-woke LGBT people? Point them to me. I know some non-woke LGBT people in my real life. I talk to them all the time. Last I checked, I had like 150 TikTok followers, so. You know, there's a person that regularly watches my show that believes that we shouldn't have prisons, right? So I've had this exact conversation. Let's say there's a murderer, right? Does he think the murderer needs to temporarily be detained? He'd say yes. But as soon as the psychiatrist or psychologist and the murderer agree that he won't commit any more murders, he should be freed. Now that's a person who wants to have allegedly serious debates on topics wide-ranging from abortion to economics to healthcare. And they seriously believe. What do you think the rest of their worldview is going to be like if they think that's a tenable goal? Well, as long as the murderer and a psychiatrist say, yeah, he won't do it again. Okay. Up to 181. Thank you so much. I thought the abortion debate was even more interesting, though. So this is what you could tell, and you'll see this all the time. Listen, let me be quite clear with who I am. I am a normal redneck that's lived, and I'm a bad redneck, by the way. And I don't use redneck as a pejorative. My favorite people in the world are the rednecks that live around me. I lived in rural Pennsylvania my entire life. I've lived within 20-mile radius. I do home healthcare now. When I was in college, I was a policy debater. Debate in college is the most radical left of the left. I debated from 2003 to 2008. I was pretty good at it. And then I became a debate judge and coach after that for a couple years before I started doing home healthcare. I'm married. I have one son. He's almost 3. I, too, had him out trick-or-treating 2 nights ago. It was a lot of fun. He dressed as T-Rex. It was a good time. I think we're going to take him out, not trick-or-treating tonight, but put him in his costume and go visit Grandma so she could see him in his costume. I hope someone's not yelling at me about a strike. What? Look, my big feminine pink cup here. It's the only one that was clean down there that's got like the insulation. So, I don't consider myself like someone who is like a student of history or a deep philosophical thinker or someone with a, exorbitant IQ. That's not who I am. I think I'm a reasonably intelligent person who has common sense, that has a worldview that I've thought about myself, and that I'm very grounded in. I believe Jesus is the Son of God. I believe the most important thing I could be in my life is a good father and husband. I believe in making my community better. I believe in individualism and personal responsibility. I believe in corruption of our institutions. And so it allows me to argue a breadth of topics because it's all based in my worldview. So even if I don't have hyper specifics, when someone explains to me the topic, if they're doing so in a way that is legitimate and good faith, I'm able to input good faith into it. Now, the reason I say this is I'm not coming here saying, you might be listening and you say, I work 9 to 5. I love listening to the Crucible, but I don't think I'm a good debater. I don't think I'm someone that could get on there and speak. Not everyone's a good speaker. Not everyone's a good debater. But I assure you, the idea that people you hear that are really good, like I don't know what the IQ of Andrew is, or if Andrew considers himself a genius, or Rachel or Zen, but I'm sure they would all basically say the same thing I'm saying. When you see them come across as these brilliant people that are crushing these people in debates, yes, they are smart, but more importantly, it's that these people they're debating are ludicrous. They are horrible. They cannot formulate an argument. They have no idea what they're talking about. So when I insult this woman that they were debating, I'm not saying like I'm so much smarter than her because I'm a great, brilliant person. What I'm saying is she is a dime a dozen of people, particularly younger people, though I have no idea how old she is, that have been indoctrinated to think that being on the left side or the progressive side of issues makes them morally superior, and they've never been effectively challenged on the actual specifics of their beliefs. So when you talk to them, it comes off as incoherent. You want proof? Okay, let's listen to her opening moments of her conversation with Zen. Zen says, I'd like to challenge you on the abortion thing. I think it's murder. She says, why? He says, because it's killing a baby. It's killing a human. And she says, is all killing murder? And he says, no. And she's like, well, why is this murder? And he says, because the baby's innocent. And then she says, something that I've very rarely heard, right? She says, because that the baby in the womb isn't innocent, right? So what did it do? Rob someone? What did it do? She says, because it is taking away the bodily autonomy of the woman. It's basically, what's the word they use? It's basically a squatter. It's squatting in the woman. The baby's not innocent, it's a squatter. So then Zen makes, obviously the first point that I would make, Zen makes it. It's like, okay, then your position given that belief is you would be in favor of abortion up until the day of birth. 9 months, no problem, right? Because that baby's still a squatter, right? And then she instantly, completely reverses her position and says, well, until 24 weeks. And then you have some cortex function. I can't remember the term she used. You have some cortex function, and that makes it different. Why? Why does that make it different? If your argument is it's the woman's body and the baby's attached, therefore the baby is not innocent, it is guilty, therefore you are allowed to kill it, why does it matter if all of a sudden 24 weeks and some sort of brain development, why does that magically change that calculus? And the reason is because the two arguments completely contradict each other. Completely. And that's the telltale sign. Within 2 minutes, you can tell listening to her, like, she has no clue what she's talking about. None. Because she's just throwing shit against the wall that she's heard. That's it. She hasn't came through a coherent thought. Now, you might say, I'll even give the benefit of the doubt. I think there are people that I don't consider immoral that consider themselves pro-choice. To me, though, it is literally beyond parody, evil, for anyone that cheers on third trimester abortions. I can't credit good faith or morality to anyone who adopts that position. It's non-negotiable. Same is true of people that believe that we need to be teaching sexuality to children. Non-negotiable. I could listen to a person that wants to tell me maybe we should have Medicare for all. I might disagree, but that's someone I could listen to. I could listen to a person say, well, maybe we should be sending money to Ukraine. Disagree, but I could listen to it. But I won't listen to someone tell me about why it's important to teach children sexuality. Why it should be occurring in our schools. I won't listen to someone tell me that third trimester abortions should be something that we're allowed. Absolutely non-starter position, as far as I'm concerned. And I've debated a lot of stupid and borderline grotesque positions, but those two especially, I have no time of day for. Right? She was reading off what people say in the chat. You see that a lot with these lefties. I wouldn't be surprised if that's true. But let's give the benefit of the doubt that that wasn't true. What it sounds like to me is she's heard some superficial abortion debates in the past, and she's just muddying them together. So she's heard people say, well, that's an innocent life. And she heard someone respond, it's not innocent because it's taking the woman's autonomy. And then she heard someone say, well, you can't kill the life because the life begins at brain activity. And she heard someone say, actually, the brain activity doesn't begin until 24 weeks. So she doesn't even understand that those are contradictory positions. Or if you want to break it down as simple as possible, Zen said it's the murder of an innocent life. And she is taking umbrage with the term innocent, saying that it's not innocent because it's squatting in the woman's body, and it's not a life until 24 weeks. But those positions contradict. If position one's true, there's no reason why 24 weeks would make it any different. In fact, why would birth make it any different? She sounds like a lefty. She sounds like she was espousing like socialist commie bullshit. Well, socialists and commies believe that your labor is an extension of your personhood. And if your labor is an extension of your personhood, that means the things you get entailed from that labor are also an extension of your personhood. So if you own a house or you rent a place or you have a space, you have a bed, you have a crib, these possessions that you own and the baby is in them and you say, I don't want the baby in my house anymore. Well, isn't the baby a squatter again? So shouldn't that mean if this baby's just a parasite or a squatter or a lump of whatever, that it's violating the wishes of the mother and her personal autonomy? Why does birth make a difference? What's the difference? They don't have an argument for it. So it's funny to listen to these people. And she, you hear this a lot. I'll tell you someone who does this a lot on the left, right? Listen to Vaush talk. Right? Listen to him talk. To a dumb person, Vaush sounds like a smart person, right? Because he uses, $10 words and, well, I think if you look at the epistemological benefits of those sort of things, we can see through a society of chambering that you would see with, proletariats versus bourgeoisie. We can't understand what the epistemological validity of the history of these words would be. We have to understand when we go through these things that it's important to look at the epistemic views that we would see when it comes vis-a-vis things like this that would occur. And it's just laughable to think my opponent wouldn't understand the, what's the word that Owen got really, heuristics that would be blah, 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 blah. Ironically, when Owen's arguing with Jim Bob about using big words, it's stupid. Owen has a point to some people, but that's not what Jim Bob was doing. But that's what people like Vaush do. They just throw, I like turning the hat backwards when I'm lefty. It's not water, it's agua, right? Vaush is just the epitome of the bad faith lefty. He just takes it to the best degree, right? I did a whole video when Vaush debated Jackson Hinkle on Syria, the gas attack in Douma in Syria. And there was the IPCW, I forget what it stands for, International something chemical weapons. They're investigators from the UN that investigate attacks. And the original IPCW whistleblower that looked into the chemical attack on Duma determined it didn't happen, or it didn't happen from Assad. And they basically, the UN quietly drummed that guy out and brought someone else in. And then that guy was blowing the whistle like, we don't think this is an attack. And so that's Jackson Hinkle's position. And Vaush is arguing that they attacked Duma, that Assad attacked Duma. Now, why does this matter? You might take any side of this issue. That doesn't matter. What I'm talking about is the stylistic ways in which these people debate. Jackson Hinkle's entire position on that debate rests on there is this expert who's a whistleblower, and here's what he said. He was on the ground and he saw this stuff, and here's what he said. And he said there wasn't an attack and that he's being silenced. And Vaush is like, I disagree because XYZ. Okay, fair enough. That's the debate, right? At one point, like an hour and a half, 2 hours into this debate, Vaush just says off the top of his head, he's like, well, you're aware that actually the author you're talking about had later writings where he agrees with me. And Jackson's taken aback for a minute. He's like, what? Because if that's true, it's devastating. That's basically the entirety of Jackson's argument, that this one whistleblower said something. So if that whistleblower eventually says, oh, I was wrong, that's pretty much end of debate. So at first Jackson's taken aback and Vaush is like, yeah, so, blah, 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 blah. But then luckily Jackson regains his senses and he's like, well, where? Show me. And Vaush is like, well, anyways, moving on to the... See what he did there? Now this girl that Andrew was debating, maybe not that bad faith, and Zen was debating. But it's the same type of bullshit. Just say any bullshit, doesn't matter if it's coherent or not. Blatantly lie, it doesn't matter. What are the stakes? If Vaush doesn't get called out in his lie, then it looks to any objective person watching the debate, well, Vaush won. Easy. If Vaush does get called out, he quickly shifts to the next topic, and there's no stakes to him. His audience isn't thinking, oh my God, if he just blatantly lied about that, what else is he blatant? It doesn't matter. I would love to debate TikTokers, Vampire Frog. I don't have enough TikTok followers. So within a few days here, Andrew's going to drum up support for me on TikTok to get me enough followers where I could debate TikTokers. Having said that, tonight, you could either watch my channel or the Crucible, and I will be debating some lefty at 8 p.m. Eastern time on the Crucible on the Electoral College. So, Average Debate Enjoyer says, I see a trend. Pick out dishonest or dumb people to debate, beat them down, and then attack the entire left. That's not picking. Is that what we did when I crushed you in that conversation we had? Was that me picking out the stupid people on the left? For those that don't know, Average Debate Enjoyer is a lefty that watches me. And here's what happened. Average Debate Enjoyer is sort of like a neocon lefty. He's one of the lefties that thinks we should be interventionist. He's more of like a Hillary Clinton type left-winger Democrat, right? And what he's quickly finding out, like many of those sort of, I just want to be a corporatist lefty, is that he's made his bed with a bunch of radical people that hate him. And you see this a lot right now with the Israel-Hamas conflict. You had a lot of people that were Jewish or that were academics that supported Israel, but they also supported this massive identity politics, cultural Marxist movement to go against Christians or to go against white people or to go against men or to go against straight people. That was all good. It was okay to silence MAGA people and silence conservatives on campus and, get them fired from their jobs or canceled or get them removed off places like YouTube. That was all good in the hood. That was good. But then once it targets a group they like, all of a sudden they speak up and they're like, whoa, cancel culture. Now, I'm not saying Average Debate Enjoyer himself. I don't know him long enough to know if he was pushing for the canceling or whatever, but he's ran afoul of the more radical people on the left. So he comes to a community like this, and you'll see an awful lot of left-wingers do this. They'll come in, and they'll see affable enough to a conservative, right? They'll say, yeah, okay, we don't agree on everything, but affable person, common sense person, so we agree on a lot. And then what they'll try to do is convince you that if you as conservatives just switch enough to their position, then they could vote with you. Then they could support you. But they never will. They're full of shit. You see, Average Debate Enjoyer, you ran afoul of the people you made your bed with. So go fuck yourself. That's my honest opinion of you. You're welcome to stay here. You're welcome to be an example of the shitty moderate lefty that should be made fun of because you made your bed with these shitty people. So I'm glad you're here. And I wish you well. I don't wish you any personal animus whatsoever. But fuck you. When you start telling me, well, actually, Joe Biden's, he's doing a good job, blah, blah, blah. Fuck you. No, I'm not a lefty. You have an inflated sense of ego that you're a good debater. You're not. You're not very good. When you called me, you said that you made some points that you thought that I was good on. No, what it was is it wasn't a debate. It was a conversation. You were an interventionist. You were unable to point out good examples of in the past 50 years why our intervention has been a net benefit as opposed to the disasters that I was able to point out over and over again. You know that I argue with Pisco, who's a left-winger who's shit, and you don't like Pisco, so you use that to sort of butter up to me to be like, oh, well, you know, I could butter up to Rob because he doesn't like this guy, enemy of my enemy type thing. But don't get it twisted. I don't like your fucking political ideology. I don't need your fucking opinions. I don't need it. You have an inflated sense of self. And when you come on and arrogantly want to say, like, sounds like the Crucible and people are just debating left-wing people that aren't that good, that's because you somehow imply that you are somehow better. You pick the topic you could call in right now and I'll fucking crush you. How about that? You said Joe Biden was good. Want to call in now? You want to get smacked around? Because I don't want to be accused of nut picking, and clearly you have an inflated sense of self. So, okay. So there you go. So we'll get a little debate action. You can see, you know, here's a lefty, right, who says, you know, it's not fair. The Crucible people, they're just picking on people that aren't that smart. So the issue we'll be debating is his point that Joe Biden's actually doing pretty good. That's what he thinks. Doing pretty good. Let's see, move to... All right, average lefty debate enjoyer. Why don't you go ahead and give us your opening statement on Joe Biden doing a pretty good job?
Hold on, let me get on my... I got a new microphone. I'm getting it all set up.
Okay.
First off, damn, dude, what's with the toxicity?
It's who I am. It's how I feel. I find you to be sort of a, you know, be hot or cold or let me spat you from my mouth. That's the impression I get from you.
Oh, no, I'm a very happy, nice guy. I'm not trying
Well, that's fine. But lest I be accused of nut picking by you, I assume you don't consider yourself a nut. So you'll have your say. Okay.
It's not picking. It's taking very unpopular opinion, like you were talking about with praising, not even just being in favor of it, praising and cheering on third trimester abortions. What percent of the Democratic Party is even in favor of third trimester abortions?
My guess would be, I don't know. All right, great. This is a great area of debate. Okay. I don't know what percentage of Democratic voters would say that specifically, but the leadership of the Democratic Party, it is 100% their platform to support third trimester abortions.
It is not, though.
Yes, it is.
Like, I can find you the Democratic National Platform from the DNC, and it's not in there.
How many people prominent in the Democratic Party do you think I could find saying there should be no law, it should be between a woman and her doctor?
My guess is about 20% of the party.
I disagree. I've heard Joe Biden say that. I've heard Karen Jean-Pierre say that. You want me to pull up the would you say he's the leader of the Democratic Party at this point?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and are you disputing that him and his press secretary have said that?
I mean, they may have said something along those lines, absolutely, but they're just kind of virtue signaling.
No. See, now do you see? You're being a good little lefty. There you are. You're being a good little lefty. So you're saying that we can't take them at their words when they're criticizing the opposition, when they're trying to win election and saying, this is our plan. Our plan is it should be strictly between a doctor and the woman, which entails no law from the government whatsoever. I could tell you, for example, in my state of Pennsylvania, one of the biggest gaffes that we were told from Dr. Oz in his Senate race against human vegetable John Fetterman was when he said, look, these are complicated situations. When there's things like this, what should happen is we should have a woman, her doctor, and the local officials and things like that should come up with policies to describe. Now, this is actually more of a pro-choice position than probably the average right-winger would have. Dr. Oz is trying to throw an olive branch out to the pro-choice people, right? And what he's saying is, in each state, we should have them decide what the law should be, not some national law that says that's what Oz was saying. Oz was lambasted in our national media, and particularly in our state media, very effectively by everyone saying, what do you mean a local official? There should be no one. There should be no voice whatsoever other than the woman and her doctor. That was John Fetterman's position. That was the national media's position. That was the state media's position. And it was used to great detriment to Dr. Oz. So for you to come on and say, but that's not what they really believe. Bullshit. That's what they believe. That's what they say, and I'm not going to allow you to be like, well, we have to know when they're lying and say that that's just an obvious lie because it's virtue. Bullshit.
No.
I'm holding them to the words that they said.
I'm going to hold you to exactly to what the words they said as well are. You're taking empty platitudes. You're taking vague political talking points, and you're subscribing a whole layer of beliefs that are not said in that empty platitude to their opinion.
The platitude was their number one argument on the issue. Yes or no?
You're loading up the statement. No.
Was the platitude? So you
okay?
So then your argument is that I'm erroneous when I say that the big attack on the issue of abortion against Dr. Oz was him saying that officials should be involved. You're saying that I'm wrong. That actually they were saying, oh well, we say that as a platitude, but here's our definitive abortion position where we say that actually there should be a law that it shouldn't just between a woman and a doctor. That's what you're saying. Okay, can you point that to me? Cool, point it to me. Show me Fetterman saying that. Go ahead.
I don't know what you're asking me to get Fetterman.
I want you to find me. You're saying that it wasn't Fetterman's position that we heard articulated by him in the national and state media over and over again. Listen, that you just asked me what I'm asking for, and so I'm telling you. Why am I going to leave you keep talking if you've already admitted you have no idea what I'm asking for? So you have to let me tell you what I'm asking for and what my statement is before you could respond, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm telling you is that Fetterman's number one attack on the issue of abortion was the fact that Dr. Oz said that there should be some sort of official or some sort of law involved. And his attack and the national media attack and the state media's attack, first and foremost, their biggest statement on the issue of abortion was, how dare he say that some official, some man would be involved in? That was their number one attack. You're saying that's not the case. That was just an empty platitude, that actually that wasn't the bulk of their stance on abortion. I'm asking you to show me what that was then.
I'm saying that is what they are saying. What I'm saying is you are taking an empty platitude and attributing much more to it than what is actually being said. You are leaping in conclusion past what is being said to make ingrained policy stances when we can actually just go look at the policy that not only that they're pulled for and being in approval of, that they actually try to pass. And most states are not passing or even attempting to pass what you're claiming. Yes,
what you're doing, and so this is why average debate enjoyer should never be welcomed in to sort of a party that we would embrace, because this is the sort of bullshit. No. I understand what you're trying or not trying to do, but this is why you shouldn't be welcomed in, because what he'll say to you is it's okay for them to use platitudes and statements that we have to know aren't true. So right, when they say this shit, it's okay when the average American that's going to be voting, when they say shit like, oh, we would never, it's a doctor and her choice only, and this guy's evil because he suggested any sort of law. That's evil, and that's tyranny, and that's taking away a woman's choice. And what we're obligated to do, me and you, is this: say, oh, clearly we should be good faith and assume that that's not what. I disagree with you. I think that our obligation is to hold them to account for the things that they say. And if they say that you are evil if you want any law, and then way down the line here they said, by the way, there is some sort of law we want. Fuck all that. When their most vocal position when it comes to trying to win elections, whether it be truthful or virtue signaling, we should hold them to account to their words. Just like if they say walls are racist, we would never support walls. And then you say, but Rob, if you look down in line 187 of the last budget, they did spend $50,000 for a wall. So clearly we should ignore the fact that they said walls are racist because they do support walls. No, we should correctly point out their hypocrisy and how they're full of shit. But when their central point that they're trying to do, their main point is to say no law whatsoever, I'm sorry, I don't give them the benefit of the doubt. Oh, they're just liars that are fucking virtue signaling. But actually, if you go down and look, they do believe in some laws. No, I'll hold them to account to what the position they said was their position. That's what I'll do. You could choose to say, because you want Democrats to win. So I totally get it. I know why you would do it. You would say, I don't hold them to account to what they said. I don't want to hold them account to what they said because that looks bad for my position. So I'll say it's a radical position. Now, what a good faith person would do if you were in your position would say, yeah, Rob, you're absolutely right to point out that it is the establishment Democrat position to sort of put out there in virtue signaling that their policy is no law. And you're absolutely right to criticism. But the truth is, when you really look at the laws they're providing, that there actually is sometimes laws that they suggest that people should get involved. But that's not what you've done. Well, real quick, that's not what you've done. What you said is, we're not picking. We're talking about positions that aren't really well-established positions from the mainstream Democrats. That's completely untrue. As you're already admitting, that their mainstream position that you just say it's a virtue signal is that they believe no laws whatsoever.
No. Okay, so again, there's a lot of stuff you just packed into that 5 minutes. That you're taking
That's because I'm smart.
50 million people. Well, not a lot of it's inaccurate. Taking 50 million people and compacting them into a blob of groupthink. When in reality, again, we have a ton of polling data that shows this is not a mainstream Democratic position. This is not what most left-wing voters want.
I don't give a shit. It's the people they vote for and what they say that they want.
You're taking empty platitudes. Like, okay, so you remember when Trump used to say, make America great again? Come on, you got 5 minutes. Let me at least get one or two. Trump saying, make America great again. People would actually try to dissect that as a literal argument. They go back and be like, what does he want to make great again? He wants to bring back Jim Crow. He wants to oppress black people, etc. They would find these things from America's past that Trump never said, and they would attribute them to his vague political statement. I mean, I get it. Yes, not everybody pays attention to politics. You have to simplify your message for the people that aren't actually as plugged in as you or I. It's not a bad thing for them to do, to try to make their message more accessible to people that aren't in depth in politics. Like, you're framing it as they're disingenuous or they're evil. They're not. They're just simplifying it. And every single politician does it to a degree. It's not a bad thing. These are all decent human beings. And again, I don't like that they use the charged rhetoric. I don't like that they went against an argument. Like, if you asked John Fetterman what his views on abortion are, he's not going to say up until the third month, up until the end of the third trimester, no limits at all. He's not going to say that. If you ask a conservative who's a free speech absolutist what their positions on free speech are, they're not going to say to incite violence, because there are caveats to these things. But when you're making very narrow, quick political statements that you want to carry over as some sort of trend or topic or something people talk about that aren't plugged into politics, you oversimplify the message. And that's all it is. It's as innocent, and you're making it sound like they're loading it way up worse than they actually are. And that's actually what's going on, dude.
All right, so two things to respond to this. The second part's going to be the more important part. But the first part is, notice how the comparison that he used was from politicians who are making attacks that you are immoral if you believe there should be any law regulating abortion. That's the same as saying, make America great again. You see how that's the choice that he made to compare? Now, imagine that Donald Trump said something like this. I will deport all illegals. All illegals. No illegal should be allowed to be here. Do you think for a second average debate enjoyer would go, well, actually, that's just oversimplifying platitudes. No one should be afraid that he said that's a policy that he'll actually push for, right? It's just simplifying. It's an empty, of course not. Average debater would be sitting here saying, that's what he said. I don't give a shit about your virtue signaling that you're accusing the left. I don't give a fuck if you voted for Trump or not. I guarantee that had he said that, you would be saying, yes, that is something that the opposition to Trump should be able to talk to as a credible position, because he articulated talking about laws that he would or would not like to see in place. Similarly, it's not that Democrats just said, her body, her choice, and that's the end of it. They literally attacked their opposition over and over, in particular in my state, when someone was giving the basic pro-choice position, the moderate pro-choice position of, well, we shouldn't have a national law, we should leave it to the states, which is what many pro-choice people say. They either think there should be a national law allowing abortion, or it should be left up to the states. So he's basically making a neutral position, and he's attacked as being a virulent anti-woman because he's controlling her body. Not because he said, my position is no abortion ever, or something like that. Because he just said, I think that there should be laws that are at the local level, at the state level, to be able to determine with, along with the woman and her doctor. That's who should be making these decisions. He was attacked for that. The second part of what you say is, this was just totally innocent. Again, you dig your hole deeper as to why people shouldn't respect you. If that's your definition of innocent, that you're accused of being a misogynist who wants to control women, who wants to put them in the handmaiden's tale because you want some sort of legislation that speaks on abortion, not even articulating what the legislation is, just saying, yes, there is a role for government in this. And the party opposite you says, no, there should be no legislation. It should be strictly between a woman and her doctor. And you say, that's just a simplification of their position, that actually they do believe there should be legislation. That's not what that is. It's not just a simplification. It is an attack, and it's an attack designed to convince people who are radical, but also moderate members of the Democratic Party, like you apparently, that would accept it, that there should not be, we should condemn people, particularly men, that say that there should be some sort of legislation because that's some sort of control over a woman's body. That's bullshit. That's not oversimplifying oversimplification. That is attacking your opposition for believing the very thing you believe and pretending that you don't. Because you're saying, oh, secretly they actually do want legislation. Furthermore, you're factually incorrect when you're saying that it's not something that's happening at states. If you look at the legislation in New York that was passed, it's basically justification for any 9-month abortion whatsoever, because it says that a doctor has to say that there would be some sort of, I forget the exact language it uses, but some sort of harm that would incur to the woman. But when it defines what harm is, it could be emotional harm, financial harm, physical harm. Do you know any women ever that didn't go through emotional pain and things like that when they were pregnant, or didn't have emotional or financial pain or something like that? So in effect, what that says is, as long as a doctor and the woman agrees that they want a 9-month abortion, it's okay. And what was the response by the Democratic Party and even the state of New York for that? Well, they lit the Empire State Building up pink, and they all celebrated it as this huge victory. So what you're doing is you're trying to gaslight people into saying, well, just because Democrats have attacked Republicans under the slogan of, if you want any sort of legislation, you're a misogynist that's controlling women, that's just an innocent oversimplification. Bullshit, it's not. You're absolutely wrong. And you're only saying so because you have a partisan axe to grind on that debate.
It's not. So the first addressing my point was just an inaccurate character attack. And the second part was taking one word out of my 5 minutes of talking and emphasizing on that one word of innocent and not actually talking about what I said. So neither of my points were actually addressed there in your two counter points. But that being said, moving forward with my point again, I'll reiterate, these are oversimplifications because most people don't pay attention to politics as much as you and I. Yes, they're somewhat inaccurate. Yes, if you want further explanation, instead of just making it up, as you guys seem to be doing, you could ask, and we have further explanation from most Democrat politicians that say they're not on board with third trimester legislation. Only 4 states, I'm pretty sure right now, have anything on the books that can even be interpreted as that, and that's just an interpretation that you just gave. It's a guess. It hasn't actually gone through yet. Nothing like that's ever happened. It's just your guess on an interpretation. So you have 4 states out of what, 21 right now have a Democrat run state. So that would say the vast majority of Democrat-run states are not passing bills like this, meaning this is a very unpopular opinion within the party. And I compare it to Make America Great Again because it was the first thing I came up with. It implies there's other things Trump said. There's definitely a lot of toxic and divisive things Trump said I could have grabbed. I just grabbed the first one. So that I kind of, again, didn't address.
Make America Great. When you think toxic and divisive, that's one of the statements you think of.
No, I'm saying there's plenty of toxic and divisive things that Trump said.
So I will say, are you sure you don't want to go? Are you sure you don't want to go back over to the lefty spaces because you're acting like such a good little one? So notice how I accurately talk about what he said. I said 2 points: the Make America Great, and then the idea that he said these people were just innocent. And this is how he defends it. Instead of saying, "Well, wait, let me defend what I said." No, I did address your point. So he says, "Yes, I did." Right, and let me articulate how. Yes, I did, and I'll articulate further how I did. He says that it was just a one-off word that he said when they're attacking Dr. Oz, for example, because Dr. Oz says, well, I think it should be up to state legislators, the woman and her doctor. And they say, no, it should only be between a woman and her doctor. He says that's just an innocent oversimplification, right? And I talked about how it's not that, because if it was an oversimplification, they wouldn't have attacked him on it. They would have said, oh, we agree it should be up to the states, but here's what our law would be. Instead, they said the mere fact he suggested there should be a law was immoral. It meant that he was anti-woman. And he used the term and said, this is innocent. He says that's just a one word, one off that I said. But it's not, because he articulated over and over, either through implication or specifically by saying words like they were innocent, or I'm saying that they were evil or otherwise immoral, but it was just an innocent mistake. It was just a rephrasing and things like. Is that not your position?
No,
I will ask you point blank. Are you saying, or you're not listening to me, are you saying that when they, in this specific incident, attacked Dr. Oz, saying that no, how dare he suggest that lawmakers should be involved? It should be between a woman and her doctor. You're saying that that wasn't an actual attack saying we shouldn't have legislation. That was just an innocent, confusing oversimplification.
No. That's neither. It was neither. It was a simplified statement. They are not against laws that regulate abortion. This has been stated.
So then so then they're lying and being immoral. No. So then you would admit that they're lying and being immoral. Then okay. Then does everyone see? Does everyone see why it is worthless to argue with the lefty? Does everyone see that? Does everyone see? He literally. I'm not making up shit. I'm not making up shit. Like for example, if I say this, if I came to you and I see you eating a cheeseburger and I go, "You're fucking immoral. You're not. You shouldn't be allowed to run for any office because meat is murder. How fucking dare you? This is disgusting. Vote against this guy. Meat is murder." And then my position is actually I support the eating of meat. I just don't like people eating cheeseburgers. Right? Don't you think you'd say, "Wow, Rob's a fucking immoral hypocrite." Like he just accused you of doing something, but then secretly he's in favor of the very same thing. You would say, that's an immoral, shitty thing to do. You wouldn't say, "Oh, it was just Rob oversimplifying things. That's innocent. There's nothing unethical about that."
Again, you can take these statements, these vague statements, and you can go and look at actual in-depth interviews with these same politicians making these same statements, so that I'm not making a monolith of the left. I'm actually holding these individuals accountable for their words, and they elaborate. They are not against a law regulating abortion in any way. They're not going full 100% libertarian on abortion rights. Nobody is making that claim. That's headcanon. That's headcanon, so you can show that there's some form of hypocrisy that doesn't actually exist there. That is not what Democrats are saying in their oversimplified message.
This is why, I don't know how I can make it any clearer to anyone who's objectively listening. Let's say, for the sake of argument, you need to listen. You're nowhere near as smart as you think you are. You're really, really bad at this. And you're really bad faith, and you're really a partisan hack. So maybe you'll learn something if you listen, okay? You're listening? Put your listening ears on. You ready? Let's, for the sake of argument, say, in this particular instance and in general, all throughout the Democratic Party, when they've made this attack, that you're right. Let's assume that the Fetterman people and the Democrats in Pennsylvania that made this attack in Dr. Oz, when he said there should be some legislators involved and the woman and her doctor, when they freaked out and said that that was misogynistic and it should only be between a woman and her doctor and that there shouldn't be legislators involved, let's assume that you're right. Let's say that if I would go to John Fetterman's website when he was running, or I would look at the legislation that he passed, there would be a list of things that were saying, actually, we do support legislation about abortion. We don't think there should be third trimester abortion. I don't know if that's true or not, but let's, for the sake of argument, say you're right. That doesn't prove that they were unethical or immoral by claiming that it was immoral to suggest that there should be legislation as a reason to vote against their opposition. All that proves is more evidence that they are hypocrites and that they are immoral if they are on their website and not as vocally saying, actually, we do agree with legislation. But the most vocal position they're making to the public is, this guy's a fucking anti-woman monster for proposing some sort of legislation. And you continually are saying, no, it's just an oversimplification. We can't judge their morality. We can't say that's unethical because they were just trying to oversimplify. It is not an oversimplification to have a talking point that is literally the opposite of your position. If their position is, yes, we do believe in legislation restricting some forms of abortion, but their talking points are, you are immoral for thinking there should be legislation for supporting some limits on abortion, that is a fucking lie and immoral. And the fact that you can't admit that, no, you don't agree. You don't agree because you have quite articulately argued 3 times now that they are innocent, that this was just an oversimplification and it wasn't an immoral thing to do.
Okay, listen, if I didn't actually listen to these politicians talk and I just followed a couple headlines as you did, I can totally understand how you came to the conclusions you did. I absolutely get it. If you actually believed what you're saying, I can totally understand the leap in logic that you're making. I 100% get it. You don't have to reiterate it for a 4th time. I get it. I'm telling you that your interpretation of their words is incorrect because you're taking a 4-letter or a 4-word sentence and you're attributing significantly more to it than they mean or they said. It's headcanon. You're loading up the statement more than they intended it to be loaded up. Again, okay, so let me give you an example again. I'll go to Trump. So Trump put out a tweet after he had a conflict with the squad where he said, if you don't like America, you should go back to the country you came from. Now, this was probably aimed at Ilhan Omar. No other context, just that tweet. People said he was talking about the whole squad and was saying AOC's from the United States. Look how dumb Trump is. Where Trump never even mentioned AOC. They just assumed it based off of context because he was arguing with the whole squad. Now, that's exactly what you're doing. This is the same thing I argue with leftists about. You're reading the tea leaves in a way that isn't factually correct, and you're making assumptions based off those generalizations. If you want a full interview with any of these actual people, give me the name of the person, and I will get you an interview with them sitting down and talking on the subject where they go into more than just a 4 or 5 word platitude, where they actually jump in depth onto their policy prescriptions. And I guarantee you they are not going full 100% libertarian, hands off my uterus mode with their argument. This is something you're making up and attributing to them and then calling them hypocrites because everything else they said doesn't line up with it. I'm telling you, that's not their actual stance.
I'm telling you that when someone, I'm telling you what you're doing here is, if I say, again, I don't know how I can make it, I'm arguing with a bad faith fucking moronic leftist. So it sort of just ends up repeating yourself as it does with any time you're arguing with a bad faith fucking moronic leftist. So I apologize to the audience if this is getting boring, but you see the little trick he's employing there. So he conflates by saying, well, if Trump says, if you don't like this country, you should leave. I think he was only talking about one specific person. To say that he was talking about other people's different. That's sort of a value claim or a claim based on an interpretation of things they said that's not a declarative statement about the type of laws that should be passed. What Fetterman and the left did, particularly my state, but this occurred all across the country, was they looked at people that were saying that there should be some sort of legislation and made a moral judgment based on that claim. Not the claim of what the legislation should be, but the mere fact that there should be some sort of legislation or law involving possible restrictions of abortions, like third-term abortion or something like that. That act of wanting the legal system to be involved itself was immoral. And then he's saying, but actually we shouldn't hold them to judgment for that, because if you looked in to what they were actually supporting and they weren't vocally yelling at voters, they actually were supporting some forms of legislation. Therefore, it is not immoral of them, and we shouldn't judge them by literally saying, not just saying empty platitudes like, hey, her body, her choice. That's one thing. But literally attacking people because they suggested that there was a place for legislation. That is 100% immoral and hypocrisy. And that is exactly what they did. That is exactly and what he wants you to do is overlook that by saying, but Rob, here's the difference. See, I'm a heavily researched person, unlike you. And so when they made those claims, I said to myself, aha, what they're really suggesting is, here are the laws that I support. Clearly, when I say it should only be between a doctor and her woman, and you're immoral for saying there should be a law, clearly we should all do a little research and interpret that to mean everything that I just said is bullshit, and actually I also support laws. It's a fucking laughable joke, and everyone here realizes it. You could say, look, okay, they say that, and it's bad that they say that, and they're gaslighting people because they're speaking to the most extreme people of their party, and they understand that it's an effective attack to make their opponents look like misogynists. But when you get right down to it, it is not accurate to what their beliefs are, because the bills that they're actually pushing forward actually are legislation that are doing some form of abortion restriction. But I agree with you, Rob. It absolutely should be called out that their actual most vocal position is monstrous, and they are hypocrites that are lying when they're touting it because they know that's not what they really believe. Instead, you're taking the exact opposite tack. You're saying for me to point out that this is their most Democrat vocal position on abortion at the highest level, including the Biden administration, that's me nitpicking, because really we shouldn't criticize that they're intentionally gaslighting and lying to everyone, because really they do believe in some forms of laws and abortion restrictions. Sorry, fuck off. I don't believe that, Mr. I think Biden's doing a good job. I believe that they should be held accountable for their words. I believe that they are gaslighting because they understand that culturally it is. Why do you think they're gaslighting to that position if there's no popularity for that position?
I would say that a bit of it is fear of the far left flank. Joe Biden's not doing good with young people, for sure. Oh, there is a little bit, because you are partially right. Yes, I'm not going to say you're wrong in that assessment fully. You are partially right. There is a bit of what you're saying going on. But for the vast majority of Democrats, that's not what's going on. Most people understand what they're saying when they say that. They don't want somebody coming in and micromanaging abortion through legislation. They're not making this ultra-libertarian, hands-off-my-uterus stance that you're claiming and using that to piggyback off with your second argument. I'm telling you, do what's up, Andrew?
I have a question. Hey, how you doing, man? Nice to meet you. I hope you don't mind if I just ask.
No, go for it.
Questions. I was listening. Can you help me out first by telling me what you think the official Democrat position is on abortion?
Well, there's two sources for that. Depends on what you mean by the official Democrat. Like, are you talking about the party apparatus itself or the totality of the voter?
I would say the party apparatus. Forget the voter for a minute.
I would go with the DNC. They are more in favor of less and federal legislation on abortion, less state, more federal legislation on abortion. The pre-Roe or the pre-Dobbs standard, essentially.
Right. So they want to roll back to kind of this overturning of Roe v. Wade, right?
Yeah, in terms of passing it through the House and Senate. So for anyone that doesn't know, Roe is like no abortion restrictions for the first month and very minimal abortion restrictions for the second trimester, and then the third.
Now, was the official Democrat position pre the overturning of Roe v. Wade to expand or not expand abortion rights?
It depends state to state. Some states were definitely in favor.
No, the DNC itself. The DNC itself wanted to expand abortion rights. True or false?
I generally I'd say yes. I couldn't tell you for sure. I don't have like a. I generally agree.
So they do want to expand abortion rights, just because right now they want to roll back to this one single shred of ground which they lost initially. Does not mean that after they gain that ground back, they don't want to expand it further, right? You would agree that that's logical, it makes sense. They were trying to create expansionary abortion rights beforehand, right?
Yeah, absolutely. At least the illusion of trying to expand those rights, but yes, absolutely. Yes.
Right. So then the rhetoric inside of the ethos being that, hey, we actually want government legislation on abortion rights. What Rob is saying here would actually be true, wouldn't it? What he's saying is that, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to agree with you a little bit. To a degree, some of what he's saying is absolutely correct, yes.
Yeah, so I don't even understand what you're arguing, because the rhetoric would match their official policy, wouldn't it? So they really do think that Republicans are monsters who want to control women's bodies, and that does reflect what their kind of official policies are if we look at the pre-Roe overturning.
There is definitely a faction of that inside the Democratic Party, absolutely, but I don't think most people in the Democratic Party think negatively of people they disagree with on politics. I think those are the fringes on the outside. A lot of people we see on Twitter and online and such, but if you ask just a normal, everyday Democrat, they don't think that their Republican brothers, sisters, cousins are evil.
Do you think that they don't believe that about the MAGA people?
To a degree. There's been a lot of maligning of quote-unquote MAGA Trump supporters.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say probably.
And wasn't that the mainstream position of Republicanism for 4 solid straight years, was MAGA?
That's a tough question. I'd say no. I'd say Trump folded a lot of MAGA points into classic neoconism.
Okay, but the mainstream position of Republicanism for 4 years was MAGA. Like I don't know how you'd get around that. I mean, just look at the votes that went for Trump. Clearly, Trump was leading the Republican Party, and still is, by the way. He's leading the Republican Party right this second. So what you're talking about with the maligning of Republicans by Democrats, especially MAGA, how can you go after the largest base of support for Republicans, which are MAGA, and then kind of have the pretense that, no, Democrats don't hate us, though. They love us. They think we're swell.
I don't think they're the largest base of support. New York Times polling shows that they're about 35% of the party that are diehard Trump supporters. So the majority of the party isn't like hugely in the tank, even though they do like Trump as the number one candidate.
Well, you say, hang on. That's loaded, though, right? Diehard. What does that mean?
Like Trump over anybody. I think a lot of people.
Yeah, right. So, but they're still Trump supporters. How many of them are Trump supporters?
About 65% roughly. But
right. The overwhelming majority are Trump supporters, man.
But see, a lot of that has not. You're saying MAGA, and then you're shifting to Trump supporters. MAGA are like the people that are like all in the tank for Trump, whereas like a lot of these people support Trump because it's the best chance of winning the general.
Well, if they're for Trump, okay, then they're for the MAGA policy. Now you might.
I voted for 2020. Are you saying I'm MAGA?
I think you were.
No, I just thought he was the best on the 2 issues that I voted on, which were economy and I don't even remember at the time. But economy was my number 1 issue.
Well, but those 2 issues were trying to roll back policy to previous policies, which made America great. That's the whole point.
That goes back to my point.
That's the whole point, right?
I would say that MAGA Trump running versus what he actually did in policy, it was more of a merger between his initial stances and the neocon stances that they already had in place. A lot of what Trump did was Republican politics.
Rob and I wouldn't disagree that neocons got into the hen house with Trump. Nobody's disputing that. But what we're talking about is the ideology itself. And there's no doubt that MAGA and the idea of MAGA is definitely the overwhelming majority of the Republican base. Now, you might just say, you kind of have this bizarre qualifier where you say, well, the diehards. It's like, look, if you're a Trump supporter and you're going to vote for him, you're voting for MAGA.
So I would say that the MAGA and the diehards, I'm trying to use those two terms synonymously, I guess. I would say the people that are actually in tank for the MAGA stances are going to be his diehard supporters, whereas a lot of these people just see him as the best chance to beat the Democrats, and they aren't particularly too huge into his policies in particular over any other Republican. Most of them are considering DeSantis as the most considered person right now in the primary.
Why do they think he has the best chance, though? They think he has the best chance based on what he's saying and what he's doing.
There's a few reasons for that. He's the incumbent. That's the biggest strength, in my opinion. He had the control of the bully pulpit for a significant amount of time, and he has the best name recognition, is probably my argument.
Okay,
yeah, but they're still supporting his policies, is my point, right? It's the policy of MAGA that they're supporting that definitely led the Republican Party for 4 years. I don't know how you get around that.
Oh, like Ben Shapiro
was the official policy.
Ben Shapiro is not a MAGA person, and he really supports Trump for presidency because he said when Trump was talking prior to the election, he was saying a bunch of things like universal health care and things like of that nature, Muslim ban. And then when he got into office, his politics shifted from all these really kind of extreme stances to Republicans as usual. And he says that... No. Ben Shapiro was definitely a diehard MAGA. Definitely, especially at the beginning. He was build the wall. He was, let's get these policies in. As soon as public sentiment started to shift towards Trump, he was not letting that gravy train grow, bro. He wasn't letting it go anywhere. Okay. But prior to Trump being elected, he was like anti-Trump in the primary process and everything like that. And he shifted. He says that. He says, I made a mistake. I thought Trump was going to come in and be like this Republican liberal, which he kind of was his whole life. And he came in and he actually did a bunch of things that neocons like.
Can I jump in here for a second? Because I think this is
I'll exit the conversation. I just wanted to get some clarification. Thanks for
the rate, Andrew. Make sure you listen to this next part. All right, so it's your argument that the mainstream Democratic position is not radical on abortion, correct?
Yeah, the mainstream, the party and the voters, yes.
Okay, so when I'm talking about John Fetterman, when he's running in 2022, here's his issue on his official website of what he says on the issue of protecting women's reproductive freedom. And I'll put this up on the screen so people can see it. He says as follows: a woman's right to make her own healthcare decision is sacred and non-negotiable, period. Right-wing extremists have been hell-bent on rolling back abortion acts since ink was barely dry in Roe v. Wade. And then decades since, the GOP has worked to do away with this fundamental right with extreme laws aimed at banning abortions without exceptions for rape and incest, or even putting women who seek abortions and doctors who perform them behind bars. As your senator, I will vote to enshrine access to safe and legal abortion into federal law by passing the Women's Health Protection Act. Because deciding how and when to become a mother is a decision that should always be made by a woman and her doctor, not politicians. I will also stand up attacks on Planned Parenthood and fight to repeal the Hyde Amendment. Democrats must do everything we can to protect this fundamental right. I believe that if you're not willing to do whatever it takes to protect abortion rights when they are on the line, then you cannot call yourself pro-choice. It's that simple. Now, my question to you is, based on what I just read to you, there's one piece of legislation there. So all of this, when he says it should only be between a woman and her doctor, we should ignore all of that and instead focus on the legislation that he's saying he's pushing, correct? What's that?
I agree.
Okay, so the Women's Health Protection Act. Let's see what the Women's Health Protection Act, that's what he suggests he's putting. Now, there's a bunch here that goes through definitions. The findings part of it, it's by abortion access is important to women. There's a whole bunch of that. Let's get down to what the bill actually does. The purpose. Protected activities and service. There's pre-viability. Let's skip down to post-viability. Now, you agree post-viability would basically be talking about late-term abortions, second and third-term abortions, correct?
Yeah, 20 weeks
okay,
plus,
so here is the bill that is pushed by John Fetterman and what it says about third-term abortions. In general, a healthcare provider has the right under this act to provide abortion services, and a patient has a corresponding right under this act to terminate a pregnancy after viability when, in good faith medical judgment of the treating healthcare provider, it is necessary to protect the life or health of the patient. This paragraph shall not otherwise apply after viability. Additional circumstances. A state may provide additional circumstances under which post-viability abortions are permitted. Limitation. In the case where termination of the pregnancy after viability and good faith medical judgment of the treating healthcare provider is necessary to protect the life or health of the patient, the state shall not impose any limitations or requirements described in paragraph 1. So you would agree that this says if it is for the well-being of the, quote, life or health of the patient, then this bill says it should strictly be up to a doctor and the woman, correct?
So it's in the interpretation of life and health. I agree.
Okay, how has the Supreme Court defined that?
I thought you'd have that ready to be.
I do have that. Ready? So referring to the New York law that was passed that I already said justified 9-month abortions, it says that, similar language, that it justifies it if it is the well-being or the health of the woman, then you could have a third trimester abortion. This is from factcheck.org, defining health and viability. Roe v. Wade held that the states may limit abortions after fetal viability, except in cases of necessary to preserve the life or health of the mother. Fetal viability is determined as a point when the fetus is potentially able to live outside the mother's womb. The New York's law does not explicitly define health. In what is considered the companion case, Doe v. Bolton, the U.S. Supreme Court held that medical judgment may be exercised in light of all factors: physical, emotional, psychological, familial, and the woman's age, relevant to the well-being of the patient. All these factors relate to health. This allows the attending physician in the room his needs to make his best medical judgment. So it includes health could be your physical health, your emotional health, your psychological health, your familiar health, or the woman's age. In other words, if a doctor thinks any one of those things encompass health and that it would be detrimented, that one of those things would be detrimented by the birth, then they are allowed in good faith to say, we terminate this. Do you disagree with my reading of this?
No, not at all.
Okay, so that means that John Fetterman's bill that he's pushed forth says that if a doctor basically for any reason and a woman determines to have a third trimester abortion, there should be no law restricting it, correct?
To a degree, yeah.
Okay, but you're saying that's the minority position of the Democrats, correct?
Well, that's the majority position of the Democrats.
Well, wait, you just said that's not true. You said that I was nitpicking when I said that their choice was between only a doctor and her woman and there shouldn't be legal restrictions.
I did not.
Yes, that's what you said. That is exactly what you said.
No. You're loading the words back up again. You asked the question with unloaded words. I answered it with unloaded words, and then as soon as I did, you started loading the words back up again. Now, you cannot get an abortion if you stub your toe.
Why
you can't go into a doctor.
Why can't you? You can get if a doctor says
regulation.
No. If a doctor, for example, says that I think it would be detrimental to your financial health to have this baby. Can you think of any circumstance whatsoever when someone has a kid and it doesn't cost big amounts of money?
Yeah. I mean,
go ahead, give me it.
I don't think there is one.
Right. So then any reasonable person could say that any pregnancy or bringing a child in the world could be detrimental to a woman's financial health.
I mean, you could make this argument in a vague, yeah.
Okay, so that would mean
around doctors, you could make that argument. Absolutely.
What do you mean if there was no regulations? There aren't. That's what this bill is suggesting. There shouldn't be any regulations. If a doctor feels it would be detrimental for that woman's health and any of the reasons listed, including familial health, whatever the fuck that means, financial health, emotional health. Can you think of a situation where pregnancy isn't affects your emotional health? Can you give me an outline, a scenario when that would be the case?
No, but see, doctors have an obligation. They have their own regulations through the oaths that they take, through the licenses that they get. There's other things that limit doctors from taking any action that they want.
That's not true. I could dig up that while it is true that they have the Hippocratic Oath and certain laws or certain guidelines that they follow, if they make arguments, there's very little in the Hippocratic Oath or otherwise in medical doctrine that would say that if they truly believe that it would be better for the well-being of someone, they can't give some sort of treatment unless there are specific laws outside. For example, if a doctor wants to give me steroids, there are laws that are put in place at the federal and state level that say what they're allowed and not allowed to do. If there are no laws, if there is expressly a law that says if the doctor thinks it's better for my health to do it, there's nothing holding them back other than their own conscience. Right? And I could show you, there was an article, I forget what it was written, I was like 3-4 months ago, right? Where it was one of the most prolific late-term abortion doctors in this country. And it was some left-wing like the New Yorker or something that interviewed him. And he specifically talked about there is no criteria whatsoever that would prevent him from giving any third trimester abortion because he feels that a woman's right to choose is tantamount to her health. And so it is always to her health for whatever reason she says. And the journalist was like, I thought I got him when I said like, well, what if she wanted a blonde hair kid and you could figure out it'd be brown? He says, yes, I would terminate. Absolutely, because it would be bad for her mental health to not have what she wanted. So you're now relying on the argument that, well, doctors would just exercise their own judgment. That's not true. The most prolific serial killer in this country was Kermit Gosnell, who was someone that was giving abortions, who was allowing children to be born and then crushing them and killing them. So the idea that doctors are these monoliths of, sort of benevolence that would never do anything that's immoral is absolute bullshit, particularly in a society when we celebrate abortions. So again, your argument was that this isn't a mainstream position. And before I give you a chance to answer, I just want to say, would it shock the audience to know that what's the name of the bill again that Fetterman's pushing, right? The Women's Health Protection Act, would it shock you to know that it was signed by literally every single Democrat in the House of Representatives? Every single one. So I just want to rehash for everyone, then we'll give you a chance to respond. His position was, when I said, no, Democrats' position is a woman's body, it's between her and the doctor. That's what it's about. And he said, that's not picking. That's not true. That's not their belief. And we went through all this rigmarole. Then I said, okay, here's what John Fetterman's policy was. Should we look at that? Yep. And then we go through the policy and I get him to admit, yeah, basically this says it should totally be up to a woman and the doctor. That's what it should be. And then I show every single Democrat sign this. Now he's going to articulate why that's not what he said, because he's bad faith and he's going to back out from his position.
So there's a lot of things here, and I'm not sure if you're doing this intentionally or not, but when a side puts out a bill, first and foremost, talking about that act you brought up, the Women's Health Production Act, when a side puts out a bill, they go extreme on it. That's usually how every piece of legislation enters Congress in one way or another. After debate, after amendments, after changes, after different voting attempts that get voted down, and that's when you get a final result of the bill. So you're talking about going in, this is too extreme for you. Obviously, it was too extreme. It didn't get passed. So
right, because Republicans voted against it en masse.
Hold on. Yeah, well, it didn't get passed because they didn't have bipartisan support, which is what you need to pass bills. So every time a bill comes out, no matter who puts it out, it's usually pretty strict on what they want to get done. And then it gets opened up to the floor, opened up to debate, opened up to amendments, all sorts of things, and gets narrowed down to something more palatable to the majority. So the fact that you're just kind of pulling out one aspect of this at the beginning of this bill's inception and saying this is super radical, A. B, a lot of this is up to your interpretation. You're saying the doctors have zero, because one doctor said there's nothing that stops him from doing abortions, that doctors have zero holding them back. That's just not true. We have laws. The reason why the Texas law against abortion pre-Dobbs was structured in the way it was, it didn't punish the person seeking an abortion. It punished the doctor who was doing the abortion. And reason being is because that doctor was the one that actually is at fault for the action. Doctors have regulations and different oaths that they have to uphold in order to keep their license. Same way when you become a lawyer, you lose some of your First Amendment rights because you're not allowed to say anything that disparages the courts, or you can be disbarred. Legally, you're allowed to say it. First Amendment-wise, you're allowed to say it. But if you do, they'll take your legal license away. The same thing as a doctor. There's certain criteria that you have to adhere to. Now, if you can make a theoretical argument, you can bring that to the courts and try to argue with that doctor you mentioned. I didn't see whatever interview you're talking about. If that doctor thinks he has a real legal theory as to why he's allowed to give abortions because of the wrong hair color, then so be it. But I don't think that's how the laws are currently structured, and I don't think that's how they interpret it.
Okay, now, I've given you a lot of chance. You used a lot of words. I gave you a lot of. It would be different if you were saying something instant. It would be interesting. Go ahead, please. We need to hear more things. One more point that's not germane to the conversation and things you've already conceded. Please go ahead.
I'm addressing all your points.
You're not. You're not addressing any of my points. You're not. As I'll quickly, within 30 seconds, be able to dispense with your entire 2-minute diatribe there. But go ahead.
About this being the mainstream of the party, let's look for the policy that the party actually calls for. The policy they're asking for is to instantiate Roe into law, not to pass this act. This was something they tried to pass. It failed. They had a little bit of debate on it, never got back to the floor for debate, and it died in Congress, like most bills do. The actual thing that they're rallying to try to get people out to vote to pass is to instantiate Roe into federal law. So that would be the actual mainstream position of the Democratic Party. First trimester abortions unregulated, second with light regulation, third with heavy regulation.
Okay, so first, let's dispense of his. But I think that doctors, there are more things. He can't give any proof of that. He can't show any court case. I'll give him a chance to go ahead and search for something now. When there was a doctor that said that for women's health, under the interpretation of the Supreme Court, which he already admitted would mean financial health and all that sort of thing, that doctors were limited. Even if he could prove that, though, even if he could, what's that have to do with the original argument of what we said? Now, remember how we're coming to this. I said that the Democrat position was a woman's body, her choice, and they literally called people immoral and misogynist that wanted to control women's body if they wanted any legislation. And their argument was it should be exclusively between a woman and her doctor. And I said that was the mainstream position of Democrats. Then he said, no, that was just lip service. It was an innocent oversimplification. We should actually look at the bills they tried to pass. Then I go through painstakingly and show the bill that every Democrat in the House signed off to. By the way, this wasn't a long time ago. This was March 2023, and they sent it back to committee in April 2023. So this isn't something that we're talking that they did 4 years ago. It is what the Democrats in this current House of Representatives unanimously pushed forth for. It's what they ran on. People like John Fetterman, who was a senator, it didn't get to the Senate, so he didn't get to vote on it, but it's what many Democrats ran on. So first he's telling you, you can't take their words, what they're saying, because it's just an innocent oversimplification. You have to look at the policies they pushed. Then you look at the policies that they all signed off to, and he's like, yeah, but that was intentionally hyperbolic, and it didn't pass. And anyways, even if it is true that it leaves it up to a doctor and a woman, a doctor would limit himself. Let's concede that argument, which I don't agree with, but let's concede it for the sake of argument. Okay, how does that disprove my initial position? The initial position was that they say there should be no law. It should be up to a doctor and a woman. And his argument is, well, there are other things outside of legislation, outside of the law. There are sort of codes that doctors have amongst themselves that aren't necessarily legal, but that they would restrict themselves from doing certain forms of abortion. Even if that was true, which I think it doesn't take a big stretch to see how individual doctors could say, nah, sorry, dog, that ain't for me. If I feel it'll make me money or I feel it's the right thing, I'll just go ahead and give the abortion if that's what the woman wants. Even if we take that out of there, that still doesn't disprove the point that I initially made, which was it was the Democrat position to advocate for it should only be between a doctor and the woman. And now he's saying, well, yeah, that is what this bill was, but I think the doctor would limit themselves through other things. Now, notice he then goes on to say, like, I don't know what this absurd argument is, right? He's trying to make some absurd argument that says this. Well, of course, the Democrats are going to push forth a hyperbolic bill that I guess they don't believe in. Right? So think of it this way. Imagine what he's trying to tell you here, right? So you're Democrats and you're in the minority in the House. And your ultimate goal isn't to allow no laws that would mean that abortion's only between a woman and her doctor. That's not your ultimate goal. Your ultimate goal is to basically to get Roe back on the books. But instead of being moderate and trying to reach across the aisle and find a handful of people that would vote for you on that so you could get it through the House and then into the Senate and to the president's desk, instead what you're going to do is the lip service that you've been paying, telling the Republicans, you're fucking evil monsters because you want to control a woman's body because there should be no legislation, which average debate enjoyer here says, that's just an oversimplification. That's not immoral, it's just an oversimplification. So instead of saying, oh, we'll tone down the rhetoric and we'll try to pass a compromise bill that will get some of the things we want because we're the minority in the House, instead what they do is the opposite. And they go way further. And they're like, no, there should be no laws. And every single Democrat signs off. And what he wants you to believe, what if the House was 300 Democrats? What if they could ram through everything they wanted? He wants you to believe, oh, then they would have been more moderate. They would have never signed on to a bill like this one if they controlled the House. They just purposely were hyperbolic, just to piss off the people that they need to reach across the aisle from. It's ludicrous. And it's incredible. I'll finish with this. It's incredibly ludicrous when it's his position that people like me that are calling out the radical nature of Democrats on abortion are doing so erroneously or intentionally nitpicking because we literally took them at face value with their words and we literally took them at face value with the bill that they put through. Because he's saying that what we should do is mind read them and say, actually, the actual words they're saying, that's just an oversimplification. You have to go look at their policies. But when you do go look at the policies and you see what they signed off on, actually you should know that's not the policy they really wanted. What they really wanted was something far more broad. It's a fucking joke. And everyone watching here knows you got blown the fuck out.
No, this is wild. I mean, if what you said was actually accurate there in your summary, I would have gotten blown out. Fortunately for me, you left out about 3/4 of my argument. So let me kind of break it down again for you. You brought up the point that you said Democrats said no regulation around abortion with Fetterman. You brought that point up and you said I didn't address it. I addressed it. So how I addressed it was saying that's not what they said. They did not take an ultra-libertarian stance on abortion. And if you want, give me the exact name of the politician, and I'll go find you an interview with them where they talk about their stance with actual nuance on abortion. And it's not what you claim. You took a 4-word platitude and you made up headcanon around it. And now you're holding them to this standard that they don't agree with and pointing at how all their other actions don't fit your made up standard. That's because you made it up, not them. They do not have an ultra-libertarian stance on abortion. I already explained that. You skipped over that.
That is absurd. Then why did it? No. What you said was this is what you said. You said in part what you said, but the other part you said that actually anyone would agree would make more sense is you should look at the legislation that they've pushed forward. That's what you said, right? Instead of just right. So then we went and we looked at a piece of legislation that literally every single Democrat in the House signed, which you agreed. Which one piece? It was an entire piece of legislation that said that it should be between a doctor and a woman.
Yes, one piece of legislation, not what the party is saying that they want, not what they're actually advocating for, not what they're calling for on TV.
So let's pause here for a minute. Let's say that I said that I'm running for office and I say every single illegal immigrant should be kicked out of this country. And I push forth a bill and it says every single illegal immigrant should be pushed out of this country. And that bill fails. But I also sign off on a bill that says illegal immigrants that have committed felonies should be kicked out of this country. Would you point to that bill and say, oh, clearly Rob doesn't want all illegal immigrants kicked out of the country? Because, see, he signed this bill that said that he wants those with felonies. What you would say is, oh, he wants them all out, but he's also supporting legislation that does less because that has a better chance to be passed. But you're a liar.
I would ask you what you think on it. I'd ask you for more nuance. I wouldn't just assume as you're doing. I wouldn't just
but you don't get okay. So then, can you show me? I will happily take your written correspondence or interview that you had with these politicians. That means we can't trust what they said publicly, and we can't trust the legislation that they've signed on to because you've personally asked them the nuances. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Isn't it just your interpretation could be wrong? That your interpretation.
No, my interpretation of taking their exact words saying you're immoral if you think there should be any law. There's not wiggle room for that. You're the one. Could it also be that you're misinterpreting?
You're making up what they. That's
I'm not making up what they said. Do you want me to? Do you want me to pull up? Do you want me to pull up what they said about Dr. Oz?
You did, and that wasn't it.
No, I didn't.
You're generalizing it to make it sound worse.
Again, they literally said the fact that Dr. Oz. I'll pull it up if you want. I'll pull up what they said if that's what you want.
Again, like I can tell you, the vast majority of the party.
So you're deflecting. You're deflecting.
You brought up and then you generalized what they said. It didn't match up.
I didn't generalize. I didn't bring up and generalize. I told you exactly what they said. That they said
no laws, 0 laws around regulating.
They said when Dr. Oz,
0 laws is what you said. 0 laws regulating abortion on any level. Show me that anyone saying that.
Okay, I just showed you legislation that they pushed forth that you admitted said that.
Every single 0 laws in it.
No, what it said was there should be no restrictions other than a woman and her doctor and their verification of their health, even post viability. That's what it said.
That was a proposal. I didn't even
get it was a proposal that they all signed. A law. It was a law that they all voted for.
Again, and you're taking that one proposal, ignoring all the rest, and making a generalization that nobody actually stated.
And so we go back,
me a Democrat, as you claim.
And so we go
Show
back,
me a Democrat saying 0
laws
or regulation.
And so we go back to where I began. That if I said I want all illegal immigrants removed, and then I push forth a bill that says all illegal immigrants should be booted out, and then it doesn't pass, and then I sign another law that says those that committed felonies should be booted out, you would be sitting here going, "Show me Rob ever saying," and you'd say, "Well, here's." Right, and then someone would say, "Here's Rob literally saying. Here's Rob literally saying I want to live." And you would say, "But we don't know his interpretation. We don't know his interpretation." Look, I'm done with you. I'm dispensing with you, and you're gonna have. You're welcome. You're welcome to talk in my chat. You certainly are, but I'm not gonna have you on the show for the foreseeable future because you're really fucking stupid and you're really shitty hack. You really no. Everyone gets
called out for lying.
No, yeah, you're right. You're right. No, wait. You're right. I shouldn't say you're stupid. That's not fair. You may be stupid, but I don't have proof of that, and that's unfair fair to say.
You got called out for lying.
No, it's not fair to say.
And you never
you are a
addressed it.
disingenuous fucking hack. That's what you are.
I
That's
called
what
you out for lying.
What
and
was
you
the
never
lie?
addressed
What was the lie?
it.
No,
You
what you're
said
doing
you were
at the
gonna
end.
bring me citation. Where is it?
What you're doing is, hey, buddy.
Where's the citation you promised?
What you're doing, you want me to find the actual quote of what they say about Dr. Oz?
Now, I want you to find the quote about what you said they said. Zero regulation or legislation around abortion on any level. That's what you claimed.
I said that the doctors said that the Democrats said over and over that it should be. I get it. I get it. I get right. I get what you need to do. I get what you need to do. You have to interrupt me because you're a fucking bad faith hack that everyone can see. Like you're literally laughing. Everyone watching knows you're full of shit. Everyone, you literally said point to the legislation, and I did. So I'm going to tell you again. If you would shut the fuck up, and next time I'll just mute you. You interrupt one more time, you're getting muted, and you're fucking out of here. Ready? Can you control yourself? You ready?
No,
all right, we'll see it. And then I'll tell my audience what I said. All right. So, what I said was that their position, that the Democrat position was it should only be between a doctor and the woman. That, the implication of that is no laws then. That's the implication. When they attacked Dr. Oz and they said, here's the CNN article. Oz had to know the question was coming, which makes it even worse. Oz, the Republican nominee for Senate in Pennsylvania, was asked about his views on abortion rights during a debate with Democrat John Fetterman and whether he supported a federal ban on the procedure after the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade. Quote, there should not be involvement from the federal government on how the states decide abortion. As a physician, I've been in the room where there's difficult conversations happening. I don't want the federal government involved at all. Which is smart, says CNN, a Democrat rag. In order for Dr. Oz to win statewide Pennsylvania, he needs to keep it somewhat close in the suburbs, with the federal abortion ban's not popular. Unfortunately for Oz, he kept talking. I want women, doctors, local political leaders letting the democracy that's always allowed our nation to thrive to put the best ideas forward so the state can decide for themselves, which is not good. It's not entirely clear what Oz was attempting to do here. He started to borrow the language of abortion rights movement, then decided a decision regarding an abortion between a woman and her doctor. Right? The abortion rights movement says it's between a woman and her doctor. And then, in mind-boggling moment, he tacked on local political leaders, which the most bizarre about the whole formulation is, as I noted above, Oz had to know the question was coming. Democrats in Pennsylvania around the country have dedicated millions of dollars on the abortion issue. There's no way he didn't have that response. Unfortunately for him, if he was ready, this amounted to a massive swing and a miss. Democrats quickly criticized Oz local leaders' idea, blasting him as deeply out of touch with women on a very personal decision they make. Quote from the Democrats, debates are more often lost than won, and Oz lost this one with his line that abortion should be between a woman, her doctor, and local elected leaders. He is fueling the Dems' top issue. Fetterman released a new ad on Wednesday highlighting Oz's abortion comments. What remains to be seen is how Oz's comments land with voters. You see, they were saying the fact he said local political leaders, the fact that there should be politics and that, you could show me, no, average debater, can you show me that in the doc? Now, what you could do for being, one, a bad faith piece of shit hack, second, someone who's a pander, third, someone who has an overinflated sense of yourself that gets wrecked in other debates, including with shitty bad faith people like Pisco, and lastly, because you couldn't stop interrupting me over and over again, but acted like that you were going to leave and that was somehow going to, you could hit the fucking bricks, buddy. See ya. Now, every one of us here heard the Democrats repeat ad nauseum between a doctor and a woman. That's what it should be. The implication of that is that government doesn't have any role whatsoever in the law. That's the implication. Simple. That's it. When I point out that they say that all the time, he says that was just an oversimplification. The entire first part of the debate was me arguing. Thanks so much, Dex. The first part of the debate was me arguing how stupid that is. An oversimplification is if they say my body, my choice, and then they say, well, actually, we go on to mean that, there could be some sort of restrictions in third trimester. That I could buy. But when they're using it as an attack, when someone says, well, I think it should be up to politicians, a woman and her doctor, and they say, how dare you say politicians should be involved? That's not an oversimplification. If you criticize someone for saying there should be a law that could be restrictive, and then you yourself support laws that are restrictive, you're a hypocrite and you're lying to your audience to try to pander for votes. And it is fair game for me to take them at their word when they say it should only be between a woman and her doctor. that only means that there should be no other people involved, which means that there shouldn't be legislation involved. There shouldn't be lawmakers involved. I don't need them to say that other part. For example, if I said, this sandwich that I'm putting in the fridge at my work is only for me, and someone else eats it and they say, but you didn't say it wasn't for me. And I say, yeah, I said it was only for me. And then they say, but tell me where it says it wasn't for John. Oh, you never said that. Where's the quote that it wasn't for John? That's stupid. Because when I say it's only between a woman and her doctor, that necessarily means that no one else, including lawmakers, should be involved. That's the official Democrat position. When I pointed out that it's not nitpicking to say that's the official Democrat position, he then says, well, if you look to the legislation they've passed or attempted to pass, then you can see that that's not their position. So we looked at the major piece of legislation that they attempted to pass, that every single Democrat in the House signed, and it said exactly what I said. Now, again, it could be true that they're also trying to pass other more compromised pieces of legislation. That could be true. But the impetus is on him to claim that my criticism is a phantom criticism, that I'm intentionally trying to smear the Democratic Party by an unpopular position that one or two of them have and trying to apply it to the whole party. When the entire party voted for the legislation that says there should be, even in post-viability, even in third trimester abortions, it should strictly be up to a doctor and the woman making decisions based on their health. That is not an extreme position. That is the mainstream position. And if people wonder why I've been getting more antagonistic with that guy in particular, it's because he's someone who is bounced from community to community, even lefties that can't stand him anymore, and thinks that he's some sort of super debater and makes these high-minded, oh, no one will debate people like me. They debate people on the left that aren't as good as me. And you can see how fucking bad he is. That's it. Having said that, my son woke up, so I gotta go. So I do appreciate you. I'll be back on around 8 p.m., but I do appreciate it. So I'll be back on around 8 p.m. You'll hear me debating the Electoral College, so that should be fun. Hopefully it'll be a more pleasant debate than that. But hope you enjoyed it. It's fun to go ahead and wreck someone. That was a lot of fun. And that guy had it coming. So thanks so much, everyone. I'll talk to you around 8 p.m. tonight. As always, have a good one. Don't forget to follow me on TikTok. I'll put that up there. See ya.